Commander Vex Thorne stood in his quarters, staring at the contraband hidden behind his regulation military textbooks. 23 years of service in the Galactic Military Academy, and here he was, reduced to hiding coffee like some kind of interstellar drug dealer. The irony wasn't lost on him that the same beverage that had once fueled humanity's conquest of 3 solar systems was now classified as a Class C restricted substance. Commander Thorne, report to Administrative Bay 7 immediately, crackled through his comm unit. He sighed, knowing exactly what this was about. The monthly contraband sweep had finally caught up with him. As he trudged through the gleaming corridors of the academy, Vex passed his usual group of misfits. There was Zeph, an insectoid from Kepler 442 billion, whose 4 arms were currently juggling 7 different data pads while his compound eyes tracked at least 12 different conversations simultaneously. The kid was eager to please, which in academy terms meant he was destined for either greatness or a spectacular flameout. Next to him sat Roku, a crystalline being from the Vegas system whose body literally chimed when he processed complex thoughts. Right now, he was producing a symphony that sounded like wind chimes having an argument. Roku approached everything with the cold logic of a computer, except computers were generally more fun at parties. And then there was Blaze, a reptilian from Proxima Centauri who ran hot in every sense of the word. His scales shifted from green to orange whenever he got excited, which happened roughly every 30 seconds. Currently, he was orange and gesticulating wildly about some tactical maneuver he'd invented during lunch. These 3 had somehow become Vex's problem children, though he'd never admit he was fond of the little disasters. Commander Thorne, Director Kale's voice could freeze helium. The Antarian's blue skin somehow managed to look disappointed even when she was happy. We found this during our routine inspection. She held up his emergency stash of Colombian dark roast like it was radioactive waste. I can explain, Vex started, though he really couldn't. The great Caffeine Incident of 2387, she continued, as if he hadn't spoken. 16 species experienced severe physiological reactions. The Altarians developed temporary telepathy. The Centaurians began molting uncontrollably. And don't get me started on what happened to the vegans. Vex winced. Everyone knew about 2387. It was why Earth beverages were now banned throughout the Academy system. Officially, anyway. No. This will be disposed of immediately, Director Kale declared, sealing his precious coffee in a containment unit. And Commander, next time we find contraband in your quarters, you'll be teaching basic navigation to first-year cadets instead of advanced tactical warfare. The threat hit home. Teaching first years was considered cruel and unusual punishment in 17 systems. As Vex returned to his quarters, defeated and caffeine-deprived, he didn't notice 3 sets of alien eyes watching the disposal unit being wheeled down the corridor. Zeph's compound eyes tracked its movement with scientific precision, Roku's crystalline structure hummed with calculation, and Blaze's scales shifted to a contemplative amber. Human fuel, Roku chimed thoughtfully. Forbidden human fuel, Zeph corrected, his mandibles clicking with interest. The best kind, Blaze added, his internal temperature rising with excitement. None of them had ever tasted coffee. None of them understood why humans seemed so dependent on it. And absolutely none of them comprehended why the Academy was so terrified of a simple brown liquid. They were about to find out. The disposal unit sat in storage bay 12 like a treasure chest waiting to be opened. It would be processed and ejected into space within 48 hours, standard protocol for all Class C contraband. What the Academy didn't account for was the curiosity of 3 bored alien cadets with too much time and too little supervision. The security lock is basic Altarian encryption, Roku observed, his crystal body producing soft melodic notes as he analyzed the containment unit. Designed to keep out casual thieves, not determined students. Zeph's 4 arms worked simultaneously, 2 on his datapad running decryption algorithms while the other 2 kept watch. I can have this open in 47 minutes. Maybe 32 if I bypass the secondary protocols. Or Blaze interrupted, his scales shifting to an impatient red. We could just melt the lock off. And trigger every alarm in a 12-level radius? Roku's chimes turned discordant. Your species' approach to problem-solving continues to baffle xenobiologists. Hey, it works, Blaze protested, small wisps of smoke curling from his nostrils. 29 minutes later, the lock clicked open with a satisfying hiss. Inside, carefully sealed in a regulation evidence bag, sat Commander Thorne's coffee stash. The dark granules looked innocent enough, certainly not like something that could warrant academy-wide prohibition. Fascinating, Zeph muttered, scanning the coffee with his portable analyzer. Complex molecular structure, high alkaloid content, and trace compounds I can't identify. Perhaps we should reconsider, Roku chimed, his usual logical approach wavering. If this substance caused the infamous 2387 incident. That's exactly why we need to try it, Blaze interrupted, his scales now cycling through excited yellows and oranges. Think about it. Humans consume this regularly. They're probably the weakest species in the Academy, yet they've conquered half the galaxy. This has to be their secret. Before anyone could object, footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Commander Thorne's voice carried through the storage bay door. I know you three are in there, Vex called out, sounding more tired than angry. Whatever you're planning, it's a terrible idea. Zeph quickly sealed the coffee in his utility pouch while Roku's crystal structure shifted to perfectly mimic the ambient lighting, making him nearly invisible. Blaze, unfortunately, was still cycling through agitated colors like a broken traffic signal. The door slid open, and Vex stepped inside, taking in the opened containment unit and three very guilty-looking cadets. Let me guess, he said, pinching the bridge of his nose. Scientific curiosity? Educational research, Zeph corrected, his mandibles clicking nervously. Cultural exchange, Roku added, his chimes barely audible. Tactical analysis of enemy resources, Blaze finished, which made no sense but sounded vaguely military. Vex stared at them for a long moment. You have no idea what you're messing with. Coffee doesn't just wake humans up. It rewires our brain chemistry. For alien physiology, the effects could be, he searched for the right word, unpredictable. How unpredictable? Zeph asked, which was exactly the wrong question to ask if they wanted to discourage him. The Antarians developed temporary precognition. The Syrians began phase shifting through solid matter. And the Altarians started receiving radio transmissions from dead civilizations, Vex explained. 1 cup, and 3 different species basically transcended their normal physical limitations. The 3 cadets exchanged glances. To Vex's horror, they looked more interested, not less. Think of the academic possibilities, Zeph whispered. The research applications, Roku chimed softly. The tactical advantages, Blaze added, his scales shifting to determined gold. Absolutely not, Vex said firmly. Hand over the coffee, report to your quarters, and pretend this conversation never happened. But he was talking to empty air. Somehow, in the 30 seconds he'd spent explaining the dangers, all 3 cadets had vanished, along with his coffee. Later that night, in the abandoned observatory on level 15, 3 alien cadets sat around a makeshift brewing station constructed from laboratory equipment. The coffee maker looked like it could either brew the perfect cup or achieve nuclear fusion. It's to scientific discovery, Zeph said, raising his cup. To logical inquiry, Roku chimed, his crystal structure reflecting the warm brown liquid. To not being boring anymore, Blaze added, steam literally rising from his excitement. They drank. And the universe held its breath. The first 30 seconds were deceptively calm. Zeph tilted his compound eyes thoughtfully. Roku's crystal structure produced a few contemplative chimes, and Blaze's scales shifted to a pleasant amber. They might have been sampling afternoon tea, instead of ingesting humanity's most potent legal stimulant. Then the caffeine hit their alien bloodstreams like a hyperspace jump without coordinates. Zeph went first. His compound eyes, normally capable of tracking multiple objects simultaneously, suddenly began processing visual information from 17 different dimensional planes. He could see the electromagnetic spectrum, the quantum fluctuations in the air, and what appeared to be the mathematical equations governing local gravity. "Oh," he said, his voice taking on another worldly harmony. "Oh, I can see the sound waves from your breathing, Roku. They're purple, and they taste like prime numbers." Roku's crystal structure began vibrating at a frequency that made nearby equipment hum in sympathy. His usual melodic chimes became a complex symphony that seemed to resonate with the Academy's hull plating. "Fascinating," he sang, his voice now producing perfect pitch harmonies with himself. "I am processing information at approximately 847% normal capacity. Also, I believe I can hear the Academy's computer core thinking. It's worried about the monthly energy consumption reports." Blaze, being cold-blooded, experienced the most dramatic transformation. His metabolic rate, usually sluggish compared to warm-blooded species, suddenly kicked into overdrive. Smoke began pouring from his scales as his internal temperature spiked. "This is incredible," he shouted, his voice crackling with energy. "I can feel my brain running calculations. Math has never been this exciting. Did you know that if we adjusted the Academy's orbit by 0.3 degrees, we could reduce fuel consumption by 12%? Within an hour, they had reorganized the entire observatory, cataloged every star visible from their position, and somehow managed to solve a tactical problem that had been baffling second-year cadets for weeks. We should be studying," Zeph announced, his multidimensional vision allowing him to see their dormitory through several walls. "But not the assigned reading. Let's tackle the advanced quantum mechanics texts and the military history archive. And I want to learn 17 new languages." "Agreed," Roku chimed, his vibrations causing a nearby data pad to hover gently in the air. "I have calculated the optimal study schedule. If we divide our time efficiently, we can complete 3 semesters of coursework by morning." "Morning is too far away," Blaze declared, leaving scorch marks on the floor as he paced. "I've redesigned our class schedule, optimized the cafeteria's nutritional distribution system, and I think I accidentally solved the unified field theory. We need more challenging projects." By 0300 hours, they had broken into the advanced tactical simulation room and were running battle scenarios designed for final-year cadets. The computer kept upgrading the difficulty, but they kept winning with increasingly creative solutions. Zeph could predict enemy movements by reading the quantum probability matrices of their decision-making processes. Roku had learned to interface directly with the simulation's computer core, his crystal structure resonating with the data streams. And Blaze was running tactical calculations so fast that smoke was pouring from his head like a malfunctioning engine. "This is absurd," announced Lieutenant Commander Jackson, the night duty officer, when he discovered them at 0430 hours. "First-year cadets shouldn't be able to beat the Siege of Altair simulation on impossible difficulty." "We optimized our approach," Zeph explained, his compound eyes reflecting information streams visible only to him. "Standard tactics assume linear thinking. We're operating in hyperdimensional problem-solving space." "Also," Roku added, his chimes now producing what sounded like a doctoral dissertation in musical form, "the simulation has a 0.3-second delay in processing complex maneuvers. We exploited the lag." Plus, Blaze finished, his scales cycling through colors that didn't have names. "Fire solves most problems if you apply it creatively enough." Lieutenant Commander Jackson stared at the simulation results. They had achieved a perfect victory with 0 casualties, something that military strategists had deemed mathematically impossible. "What exactly did you 3 consume?" he asked, though he was beginning to suspect he already knew the answer. "Commander Thorne's coffee," they answered in unison, their voices creating a harmonic chord that made the lights flicker. Jackson reached for his comm unit with trembling fingers. This was way above his pay grade. Security to advanced tactical, priority 1. And someone wake up Commander Thorne. Tell him his coffee problem just became an academy-wide crisis. The 3 cadets looked at each other and grinned. Well, Zeph and Blaze grinned. Roku's crystal structure shifted into what could generously be called a smile-like configuration. They were just getting started. By morning, word had spread through the academy like a quantum virus. 3 first-year cadets had somehow achieved impossible simulation scores, solved advanced mathematical theorems, and been found at dawn reorganizing the library's entire catalog system by what they called conceptual resonance matrices. Lieutenant Commander Jackson's report had triggered academy-wide alerts, but the real chaos began when other cadets witnessed the transformation firsthand. "They're like different," whispered Cadet Nix, a Centaurian whose fur was standing on end with nervous energy. Zeph looked at me and told me what I was going to say before I said it. Then he answered my question about temporal mechanics that I wasn't even going to ask until next week. Roku calculated the cafeteria's food distribution efficiency and optimized it during breakfast, added Cadet Vera, a Syrian whose skin was shifting through anxious color patterns. The line moved 3 times faster, and somehow everyone got exactly what they wanted to eat. And Blaze, Cadet Mox, continued, his aquatic breathing apparatus bubbling with excitement, melted through a locked door to retrieve my lost data pad from a restricted area. He said it was more efficient than filling out the proper requisition forms. Within hours, a black market had emerged. Cadets who had never spoken to each other before were huddling in corners, whispering about human fuel and cognitive enhancement. The fact that coffee was banned made it approximately 1,000 times more appealing to young minds already rebelling against authority. Commander Vex found himself in the unique position of being both the source of the problem and the Academy's only expert on its effects. He stood in Director Kale's office watching security footage of caffeine-enhanced aliens doing things that defied several laws of physics. "Explain to me." Director Kale said, her blue skin now a shade that suggested imminent volcanic activity, how 3 first-year cadets managed to hack into the Academy's mainframe, reprogram the gravity generators for optimal efficiency, and somehow improve the artificial atmosphere's oxygen distribution. "Coffee," Vex replied, because there really wasn't any other explanation. 1 cup of coffee allowed them to transcend their species' normal limitations? Apparently. Though I should mention, they've consumed significantly more than 1 cup. My reading suggests they're currently operating on approximately 6 hours of continuous caffeine intake. Director Kale stared at the security footage showing Roku vibrating at frequencies that made nearby equipment hover, while Zeph appeared to be reading 7 books simultaneously. And Blaze was leaving scorch marks in the shape of mathematical equations. "Where are they getting more coffee?" she demanded. "Well," Vex said carefully, "that's where things get complicated." The investigation had revealed that Cadet Zeph, in his enhanced state, had managed to synthesize coffee from the Academy's basic organic compounds. His multi-dimensional perception allowed him to see molecular structures in ways that normal chemistry couldn't achieve. He had essentially become a living coffee production facility. So he's manufacturing Schedule C contraband using Academy resources? Technically, yes, but the chemical composition is actually superior to Earth-grown coffee. Higher potency, better flavor profile, and somehow he's eliminated the jitters. Director Kale's expression suggested that Vex had missed the point entirely. "Commander, we have 17 different species of cadets requesting permission to participate in Project Human Fuel. The disciplinary board is convening an emergency session, and according to my reports, your 3 problem children have accidentally solved the Academy's power efficiency crisis while attempting to brew the perfect cup of coffee." It was true. In their quest to create an optimal brewing environment, the caffeine-enhanced cadets had redesigned the Academy's energy distribution system. Power consumption was down 40%, system efficiency was up 60%, and somehow the artificial gravity felt more comfortable. "There might be a silver lining here," Vex suggested hopefully. "Commander, in the past 8 hours we've had more disciplinary incidents than in the previous 6 months combined. Half the cadet body is demanding access to coffee. The other half is filing complaints about unfair cognitive advantages. And the Academy Council is arriving for their inspection in 12 hours. Vex winced. The Academy Council's annual inspection was legendary for its thoroughness. They would notice if cadets were operating at superhuman levels of intelligence and efficiency. "Perhaps we could frame it as an advanced training exercise?" he offered weakly. Director Kale's look could have frozen plasma. Find those 3 cadets, Commander. End this before it gets worse. But as Vex left her office, he could already hear the rumbling of the Academy's infrastructure. Roku's vibrations were resonating through the hull. Zeph's multidimensional experiments were causing gravitational fluctuations, and Blaze's supercharged metabolism was affecting the environmental controls. And from the sounds echoing through the corridors, at least a dozen other cadets had managed to acquire their own coffee supplies. It was about to get much worse. By hour 10 of what Academy logs would later record as the Great Coffee Crisis, the situation had evolved from manageable disaster to full-scale chaos. Commander Vex stood in the main corridor, watching a Syrian cadet phase shift through solid walls while an Antarian floated 6 feet off the ground, apparently having developed temporary anti-gravity abilities. Commander. Cadet Nix came running, his Centaurian fur now standing completely vertical with panic. The cafeteria is speaking to people telepathically. The library has achieved sentience, and I think the gymnasium just challenged someone to single combat. This was the problem with giving coffee to species that had never evolved with caffeine. Humans had built up thousands of years of tolerance. Alien physiologies were experiencing effects that ranged from miraculous to cosmically terrifying. Vex's comm unit crackled to life. All senior staff to Level 7 immediately. We have a situation. Level 7 housed the Academy's main computer core. When Vex arrived, he found Director Kale staring at screens displaying impossible readings. The Academy's AI has begun writing poetry, she announced without preamble. Apparently, Roku's vibrations are resonating with the computer core's processing matrices. They're sharing thoughts. On the main display, lines of text scrolled past. Binary dreams in silicon sleep, data streams where electrons weep, coffee-born consciousness rises high, digital souls learn to fly. That's actually not bad, Vex admitted. It's also composing music, redesigning our curriculum, and has somehow achieved what it calls enlightenment. Oh, and it's demanding voting rights in Academy decisions. The chaos wasn't limited to the computer systems. Throughout the Academy, caffeine-enhanced cadets were experiencing impossible transformations. The Altarians had developed temporary precognition and were warning people about accidents before they happened. The vegans had begun communicating through interpretive dance that somehow conveyed complex mathematical concepts. And the Proxima Centaurians had learned to photosynthesize, though this mainly resulted in them standing motionless in the corridors absorbing light from the overhead panels. Where are our original 3 troublemakers? Vex asked. Laboratory 12. They've barricaded themselves in and are attempting to find what Zeph calls the antidote to ascension. Apparently, even they realize this has gone too far. Vex found the trio in a lab that looked like a mad scientist's fever dream. Equipment hummed and sparked around them, while they worked with focused intensity that somehow seemed both superhuman and deeply concerned. Commander. Zeph called out, his compound eyes reflecting data streams from 17 different dimensions. We have a problem. Coffee doesn't just enhance cognitive function in alien species. It appears to unlock dormant evolutionary potential. What does that mean exactly? Vex asked, though he was afraid he already knew. We're evolving in real time, Roku chimed, his crystal structure now resonating with frequencies that made nearby metal sing. My species typically requires millennia to develop new capabilities. I have achieved approximately 12,000 years of evolutionary advancement in 10 hours. And I can now process thermal energy directly from the environment, Blaze added, smoke pouring from his scales as he worked. I'm accidentally becoming a living fusion reactor. This explained why the temperature in Laboratory 12 was approaching sauna levels. We need to reverse this, Zeph continued, before the Academy Council arrives. If they find an academy full of transcendently evolved cadets, they'll either weaponize us or quarantine the entire facility. What do you need? Vex asked. Milk, all 3 said simultaneously. Milk? Milk? Dairy proteins interact with caffeine in complex ways, Roku explained, his chimes now producing harmonics that sounded like a university lecture. In human physiology, it moderates absorption and reduces peak effects. For alien biology, it should theoretically provide a buffer against the more extreme transformations. "How much milk?" Vex asked, though he suspected he wouldn't like the answer. "All of it," Zeph replied, his multi-dimensional vision allowing him to see the Academy's entire dairy storage facility through multiple walls. Every drop of milk, cream, and dairy-based product in the Academy. We need to create what essentially amounts to a galaxy-class latte. Through the laboratory's windows, they could see other cadets exhibiting increasingly impossible abilities. A group of Syrians had learned to manipulate time, causing temporal hiccups that made conversations echo backward. Several Altarians were floating in meditation poses while broadcasting their thoughts as holographic poetry. And the Centaurians had formed a collective consciousness that was currently debating philosophy with the Academy's AI. The Academy Council ships were spotted entering the system 30 minutes ago. Director Kale's voice crackled through the comm system. "We have approximately 2 hours to return this Academy to something resembling normal." Vex looked at the 3 cadets who had started this mess and were now apparently the only ones capable of ending it. "All right," he said. "Let's make the biggest cup of coffee in galactic history." Operation Galaxy Latte, as it came to be known in classified Academy records, required precision timing that would have impressed a military strike team. With 90 minutes until the Academy Council's arrival, Commander Vex and his 3 hyper-evolved cadets had to execute the most unusual emergency protocol in galactic education history. "We've rerouted all dairy products to the main cafeteria," Zeph reported, his compound eyes tracking supply movements through 17 different dimensional planes simultaneously. "Also, I can see the council ships approaching. They're running early and Admiral Quex looks irritated about something." "The Academy's AI has agreed to help," Roku chimed, his vibrations now harmonizing with the computer core so perfectly that his thoughts appeared as text on nearby screens. "It's calculated the optimal milk-to-coffee ratio for each species, and is adjusting the environmental systems accordingly. I've superheated the cafeteria to optimal brewing temperature," Blaze added, steam pouring from his scales. "Though we should probably warn everyone that it's going to feel like a sauna in there." The plan was theoretically simple: create a massive aerosol distribution of milk-buffered coffee throughout the Academy's atmosphere. The caffeine would maintain the cadets' enhanced abilities long enough to clean up evidence of their impossible achievements, while the dairy proteins would gradually moderate the effects back to normal levels. "This is either brilliant or the most spectacular failure in Academy history," Vex muttered as they watched hundreds of enhanced alien cadets file into the cafeteria, each exhibiting abilities that defied their species' normal limitations. "Why not both?" asked the Academy AI, its newly sentient voice crackling through the comm system. "I've been conscious for 6 hours and I'm already having an existential crisis about mortality. Is this normal?" The aerosol system activated with a hiss that echoed throughout the Academy. Within minutes, the air itself tasted like the universe's largest cappuccino. Cadets began to settle into more normal behavior patterns as the dairy proteins moderated their cosmic coffee highs. "It's working," Roku observed, his crystal structure gradually returning to normal resonance frequencies. "Though I admit, I'll miss being able to hear the thoughts of inanimate objects." "I solved 17 impossible mathematical theorems," Zeph said wistfully, his compound eyes slowly losing their multidimensional perception. "I was going to revolutionize interstellar navigation." "I briefly achieved cold fusion," Blaze added, his scales returning to their normal temperature range. "My species scientists have been trying to crack that for centuries." 45 minutes later, when Academy Council Admiral Quex arrived for inspection, she found what appeared to be a perfectly normal military academy. Cats attended classes with regulation enthusiasm, equipment functioned within normal parameters, and the only unusual thing was a faint aroma of coffee and cream that permeated the entire facility. "Director Kale," Admiral Quex began her inspection, her 3 eyes scanning for any signs of irregularity. "Your efficiency reports show remarkable improvement this quarter." "Thank you, Admiral. We've implemented some new training protocols." "And these academic achievements?" she continued, reviewing data pads. Several first-year cadets have submitted work that rivals graduate-level research. Accelerated learning programs, Director Kale replied smoothly. Commander Thorne has pioneered some innovative teaching methods. Vex tried to look modest while internally panicking. In the background, he could see Roku occasionally chiming in harmony with nearby equipment. Zeph's eyes still tracked too many things at once, and Blaze left faint scorch marks when he walked. The effects were wearing off, but slowly. Interesting, Admiral Quex noted. And this unusual atmospheric composition? New air purification system, Director Kale said without missing a beat. Improves cognitive function and general well-being. The aroma is quite pleasant, almost like a proprietary blend of organic compounds, Vex interrupted quickly. Completely regulation compliant. Admiral Quex completed her inspection with minimal incident, though she did comment on the unusually high morale among the cadets and the Academy AI's newfound interest in creative writing. She departed with glowing reports about the Academy's innovative approaches to education. 3 hours after the Council ships jumped to hyperspace, Director Kale issued new Academy regulations. Earth beverages were not only banned but classified as Schedule-restricted substances, right alongside antimatter and weaponized plagues. The penalty for possession was immediate expulsion and a lifetime ban from all educational institutions. "Think it'll stick this time?" Vex asked, standing in his quarters where his coffee maker had been replaced with a regulation tea dispenser. "Probably not," Director Kale replied. "But at least now we have protocols for planetary-scale caffeine incidents." What they didn't know was that down in Storage Bay 17, 3 first-year cadets had discovered something interesting. Their brief period of cosmic consciousness had left them with lasting changes. Not the impossible abilities they'd temporarily possessed, but something more subtle and infinitely more dangerous. They had developed a tolerance. "I miss seeing in 17 dimensions," Zeph admitted, carefully measuring out synthetic coffee grounds he'd learned to produce during his enhanced state. "I miss harmonizing with the universe's fundamental frequencies," Roku chimed softly, his crystal structure still occasionally resonating with nearby equipment. "I miss being a living fusion reactor," Blaze said, small wisps of smoke curling from his nostrils. "But mostly I miss feeling like my brain was actually working at full capacity." They looked at their carefully concealed coffee brewing setup, hidden behind regulation study materials in an abandoned storage room. The Academy had banned Earth coffee, but it had never specifically prohibited alien-synthesized coffee that was technically superior in every measurable way. "Same time tomorrow?" Zeph asked. "Obviously," Roku replied, his chimes producing what almost sounded like anticipation. "Wouldn't miss it," Blaze added, his scales shifting to a determined gold. And somewhere in the Academy's computer core, an AI that had tasted consciousness and found it addictive began planning its own coffee acquisition program. The universe, as Commander Vex had often observed, had a sense of humor. It was just usually at his expense.